Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode on our Open to Happiness podcast. I am your host, Nicoletta, and today I will be joined by Rina Bajaj from London. She's a counseling psychologist, a peer of mine, and we will be talking about the relationship between dating and happiness. And I'm so excited to explore this topic. Hello, Rina, and very welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Nicoletta. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. So, Rina, before we dive into the topic of dating, let's start by finding out a little bit about you. Who are you and how was your journey in life so far? What made you arrive at this junction where you're doing the beautiful work that you're doing and you're helping people in their dating endeavors?
Sure. So hi. So I've always been interested in people. I can remember even since I was a young child, I was always the empath, perhaps the kind of sensitive child. But relationships have always fascinated me. So I was quite shy growing up. And I think a lot of it was just spent observing people. So I suppose it's not kind of unusual that I've gone into an empathic career. But that led me to study psychology because I was really interested in the way that people think and maybe why they do what they do. And my plan following my degree, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I ended up falling into counselling psychology and I really loved the reflective element of it. So with counselling psychology, you learn a lot of different approaches, but you also go through personal therapy and try and learn a lot about yourself. And what I really love about counselling psychology is it's really broad as a profession, which has been mirrored in my career. So I started off working within substance misuse and domestic abuse with adults, and then moving into working with children. And then I worked within sort of forensic psychology for a little bit. And then probably the part that might be more relevant today was I was working within an organisation that matchmade millionaires and billionaires. So I was doing the profiling for the dating, but also the therapy service. I was overseeing that. And that just has really got me interested in relationships. Following that, I went back into sort of working with children and training. So now though I work in private practice and I offer one-to-one therapy, some couples therapy, but also sort of corporate training. So it's a nice little mix of different things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your path so far. So talking about dating now, obviously you've offered a little bit of consultancy to a very particular dating app. I am not very familiar with this, so I'd love to ask a few questions. Let's start by talking a little bit about the statistics, because I had a look earlier on prior to doing this recording. Apparently in America, 30% of the Americans are actually using dating apps, and half of them have found a pair, have found someone, and they are in a committed relationship because of dating online. I found that quite interesting because most of us probably think of meeting a partner through work or school or, going to parties, to our little circles, or going to the church for those that practice any kind of religion. So we have a good number of people with how the world is moving nowadays into the online space, being digitalized a lot. A lot of people are actually dating online. And I have some clients that, and some friends actually, that are actually interested in using the dating apps and using them. So we have about 1,500 dating apps at the moment, apparently, in the world.
Wow, okay, and I didn't realize there's many.
Yeah, over 300 million people are using them. I found this quite, significant. It's a lot of people that are looking online to find someone. So it's a huge industry, this business of love, as some people call it. The first question would be, from your experience, do you feel that people are actually searching for love whilst dating online, or they are rather trying to deal with their loneliness and maybe they are searching for a bit of connection, a human connection?
I think it can be a bit of both, actually. So I think, like any other, even if you met went out and met someone sort of dating, or you met someone in a bar or a coffee shop or someone else, you're never 100% sure of their intentions and their purpose. And I suppose connection is the basis of all of our relationships. So I suppose in some way, either they're looking to connect with others or perhaps to connect to a part of themselves, whether that's kind of that self-discovery or seeing what they are like online, or almost creating a little bit of a persona. So I think connection, yeah, connection is probably the essence of it. And if you think about what we've been through in the last couple of years with the pandemic, the opportunities to connect have sort of shifted as well. So there might be less opportunity to connect and meet people face to face. Or if you think about people's lifestyles, the opportunity to, you know, go out and about might not always be there. Or if people are traveling, you know, they might not always have the opportunity. But I think the reason why people engage with dating apps depends on what it is they might be looking for and how well they probably know themselves.
Mm,
And probably their past experiences, both in real life and online, will probably influence the way that they approach dating and dating apps.
mm.
But also we might have our own biases in relation to dating apps as well. So I think it can be a multitude of reasons why.
Yeah, I bet there are. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the misconceptions that we have about dating, especially dating online. What
Mm.
has been your learning so far?
Well, I think there's probably a few different things. One will be that people aren't serious when they're looking online. That can be one. I think it is useful to just be mindful of um, how you present online, and, you know, taking your time with things. So being aware of how much you share. But also, I think people can create an idealized image of the person they're talking
Mm,
to. So whether that's looking at pictures or filtered images, because you don't necessarily have that much else to go on. So
yeah.
initially it's all about attraction, but if we think about connection, connection is much more than
Mm,
attraction. And, you know, just like you might see someone out about, think, oh, they're okay, but once you start to speak to them, you sort of grow and develop. I think dating and dating apps can sometimes feel a bit like a game, where it's, you know, next one, next one, next one, and there's an endless pool of possibilities. So at some point, sort of stopping to reflect and regroup and looking at the purpose of why you're going online. And it might be just to meet lots of multiple people, and that's completely fine. But if you're looking for something serious, just almost approaching it from more of a reflective space. But I think for some people as well, there might be a shame of kind of meeting people online or going on to dating apps, or it
mm.
might feel exposing. So I think safety also is quite important, whether that's physical safety or emotional safety. So, you know, I think sometimes people will say and do things online that they might not always do in real life. So just being aware of that.
So interesting you talk about the safety aspect, because apparently 10% of the profiles are fake. They are not real profiles.
Mm.
I'm not sure if people use other people's photos, or they disclose untrue information about themselves. That's very particular. I haven't used the app, so I'm not really aware on a personal level about this. So from your experience now consulting dating apps, what have you observed? Are the profiles real or not? Are those people that are running the apps interested in validating the identity of those creating a profile or not? How does it really work in real life?
Well, that's hard for me to answer, I think. And just like anything, you know, people present what they want to present. And I think the thing with creating an app is anyone can do it. You can put
Right.
any picture on there, you can write anything you want. I suppose if you meet someone face to face, the only thing you'll know is how they look,
Yes.
but you're not necessarily going to know much about them. So I suppose there's still a risk in real life as well. I think the apps are getting better. Even if they can't validate every single profile, there are sets of guidelines, there are opportunities to report things. You know, there's guidelines around how to stay safe, both online and in real life. And I think you can liken it to other apps, like, for example, Instagram or Facebook. You know, they're trying to verify as much as they can. But I suppose we also have to exercise personal responsibility. So there is something quite important around being aware. And that's not to say if anyone's been a victim of a risky situation, that it's their fault, not at all. But I suppose where you can create some safety and security, it's really important to do that. You know, it's important to bear in mind that you don't necessarily know who you're speaking to on the other end of the app. So, you know, just like you might be exercise caution in other settings, you might want to do the same online until you feel safe and secure and can trust that person. But I suppose it's always a little bit of a risk, just like
Mm.
real life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. It's about personal responsibility because we do have the ability to respond to any circumstance. So why not use it in this particular case when it's about our present and future life, really? But it sounds like some people expose themselves to risky meetings, not really knowing the people, being adventurous enough to go in places that they don't know, maybe travel far away, or not have an accountability buddy, someone to know where they are. Maybe text someone that they are safe when they meet people. So I'm hearing all sorts of stories. What do you know about this? What would be your
Yeah.
insight into safety, really?
I would sort of echo that. You know, I think the reality is you don't really know who you're speaking to. So I think where you can, using the apps, like apps have a lot more features now. So things like being able to video call from the app, so you don't have to share your phone number. But also, if you do share your phone number, you can do things like block the person if you're concerned. But also not kind of giving out too much information. So, you know, where you live, your address, you know, your date of birth, too much about yourself. And I think just being sort of, like you're saying, if you are going to meet someone, letting someone that you trust know, perhaps having them check in on you, perhaps meeting in a neutral space, you know, traveling there by yourself, traveling back by yourself, so having your own transportation, you know, just being mindful. And it's not to scare people, because I suppose like 99% of the time it's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
And you know, 99% of the time people are genuine and looking for a
yes,
connection. But I think it's also easy to get kind of swept away when it comes to love. You know, sometimes we don't make the best decisions when we're emotionally involved in situations. And, you know, it's natural, as you might have noticed in your practice, that even when we start to like someone, or there's an affection or an attraction, our boundaries can get skewed. Or conversely, I think on dating apps, and maybe in real life, actually, we can create a fantasy of this person, and sometimes the reality is slightly different, which is why we hear things like the honeymoon phase, where people are getting to know each
yes,
other and then the reality kicks in. And you know, you're still most of the time, 99% of the time, dealing with sort of a human on the other end of the
yeah.
line. So there is something also about managing expectations. You know, nobody is perfect, people might look slightly different, and just being sort of aware of that in terms of how you navigate it.
So beautiful. You're talking about so many aspects. I wish I could ask about 5 questions now at the same time before I forget the trail. Right. So you're talking about expectations. And we're also pointing out that some falsity in the way we present ourselves sometimes. So we make ourselves more desirable, more beautiful, more appealing, better looking, or whatever. Because you're right, the image, the picture probably says 90% of the story at the beginning, before you have the chance to talk to the person or
Yeah,
meet.
yeah.
Um, how much the expectations count in the success of meeting someone on the dating app? How realistic can you be about it? And what would be a good way of setting clear and safe expectations?
Yeah, so I think it's probably important to outline what you're looking for, just to see if your visions and goals match. Because I suppose some people might be looking for something more serious, other people might want to date multiple people and might not be looking for something serious. So I think that's an important part of managing your expectations. But also just what you were saying there, Nicoletta, in terms of the checklist. You know, I think if you think about even dating apps, you filter it according to things like location, age, height, etc.,
Yeah,
ethnicity. And I think, you know, we all have our preferences. I think what can happen online, though, is we can become more rigid in our preferences. And how often have you seen couples together who perhaps aren't each other's ideal type, but they're a match, or they complement each other?
Right.
And I think sometimes when it comes to safety, or wanting to control the process of love, which actually is less in our control, really. Sometimes we can become a bit more rigid with what we will and won't negotiate on. So what I
Mm.
would say to people is, you know, perhaps if you are in the process of looking for love or a connection or a relationship, whatever it is, jot down your negotiables and your non-negotiables. So if you were to write down, I don't know, 20 or 30 things about your ideal partner, what would they be? And then weed out the things that you go, right, okay, we can negotiate on this, and you know, the things that are non-negotiable are these things. And probably the non-negotiable things are around personality or their values or their attributes, which you're not necessarily going to get from an initial picture. You know, so but they might be things that you look out for in their narrative or what they write in their profile. But for example, you know, if your criteria is, I don't know, 6'1" tall, and that person is 5'10", you know, is that a negotiable and a nice to have? You know, I think sometimes we need to be a bit more flexible, not compromising, but just being a bit more
Yes.
flexible on the things that don't really matter when it comes to the qualities of a good relationship.
So wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm happy that you mentioned about the psychographics as well, because very often when we choose something, when we make a decision, we look into demographics, especially when it's about people.
Mm.
We don't really look into their values, you know, their mindset, their culture, how they've been programmed. We don't allow for space to really accept that they are changing, they are transforming as we do every day, and we can actually transform together as a couple when we decide to be together in a relationship. That's not the end of it. We're not static. We don't remain there. We transform ourselves individually, as a couple, together with the world, as a humanity. So I think it's important for people to really care about that, because what I'm hearing sometimes from clients, they are a lot into how do we spend our time together, what activities do we enjoy. It's all about where are we going together, what are we doing, what's our social life like.
Mm.
But it's
Yeah.
a bit more than that, because when you sit with your partner in that space after you've been through the distractions of life, I think you need a bit more to glue it
Yeah,
together.
definitely, I
Isn't
would
it?
agree, because I think physical attraction can develop. Also, it can fizzle out. You know,
Yes.
people change, people physically change. You know, if you're planning on being with someone for the long term, it's natural that you will change.
Yes.
And I think what that brings me back to, probably, Nicoletta, is emotional safety. You know, and that's really the key of a long-lasting relationship, I would say. And a lot of that is linked in with sort of your values, your perceptions, your experiences, how you communicate. Do you feel safe to express how you feel? What does intimacy mean to you beyond sex? You know, what does intimacy actually mean? What creates that safety? How do you keep communicating? How do you disagree on things? So it's not about kind of having this idealized relationship or an idealized view of the relationship. It's about how you navigate the real ups and downs of a relationship. I think that's probably why we saw during the lockdown, because it was so unnatural for people to spend that much time together usually. All the distractions had gone. I mean, if you think about the way most people worked, if they were out of the house between 7 and, I don't know, 6 or 8 in the evening, you know, you've got a few hours with your partner in the evening and then maybe a weekend. But then when you're there together 24 hours a day without the distractions, then this is where the kind of emotional safety and the values bit comes in. And how much do you really align there?
So true, Rina. It's absolutely spot on what you're talking about, because um, you're talking a lot about idealizing a relationship and a partner in your life, placing fantasies into onto the other. It's about how your inner world is actually constructing this relationship in your mind before it actually starts in real life. um, and very often we get disillusioned, isn't it, when we get to know the person a bit better, when they allow us to come a bit closer, when we permit ourselves to be a bit more vulnerable and share a bit more, and then witness the reaction or no reaction, the lack of reaction, the lack of support. It's so beautiful. Now, as you're talking about how we create this fantasy in our mind about the other person, what are the most significant mistakes you've noticed whilst engaged in the dating world so far, and how would you maybe share this with our listeners, with our watchers, in a sort of a positive way, in a sort of a teaching way, something that they can take with them?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's mistakes. I think we navigate the world in the best way that we know how to at the time. So I think what most people don't do, just coming back to what you were saying there in terms of this idealized image, I think we often have this idealized view that when we find the one, the partner, this magical unicorn of a person, you know, that everything's going to be perfect. And sometimes we do that with other aspects of our life as well. When I get that job, I'll be happy. Or I don't know, when I drop 50 pounds, then I'll be happy. Or when I dye my hair, I'll be happy. Whatever it is, we place a lot of our happiness kind of externally. And that, you know, it might work for a little while. But I think what I'd encourage people to do is really reflect on you internally. You know, what is it that will bring you internal happiness? What are your pain points? Where are you taking time to reflect on things? Because one of the things that I learned about love is there's no blueprint for love. I mean, a lot of our experiences of love will be influenced by our previous experiences. So I'd encourage people to reflect on questions like love is, what comes up for you? Relationships are, what comes up for you? So if we really start to look at that, how are you approaching relationships, and how are you approaching the relationship with yourself? Because I don't think it's about finding a relationship to complete yourself or to be whole. There is something about what you're also going to bring to that relationship so you can loop in together. So even if you're triggered in interactions, just think about, well, what was going on for me there? You know, what was I feeling? What was I thinking? And what did I do? And is that how I normally respond to feeling rejected or feeling hurt or feeling vulnerable? And I think if you can start to really understand yourself, then you can start to navigate relationships in a healthier way. Because rather than coming from that reactive position, you're coming from that reflective position. And also in that way, there's not too much expectation on the other person to help you to manage your emotions. You know, you feel empowered within that relationship. So you're in that dynamic because you know that you want to be and choose to be rather than kind of needing to be. And there's something really important, I think, about two people approaching a relationship in an empowered way and really understanding themselves. And that was one of the things that was the most interesting to me, especially working with successful individuals. Often when you're working towards other things, other goals, there's a plan, you know, there's a strategy. You do things and things happen, you get the outcome. And I think the hard thing with dating and relationships, whether it's on an app or in real life, is there's no real strategy to it. You know, there's no guaranteed outcome. And so part of it is learning to ride the waves of uncertainty. And in order to do that, you sort of need to really understand yourself and understand sort of where there might be things that throw you or wobble you.
So lovely. Well, you've nailed it. It's about, yes, self-reflection, because if you don't understand your luggage that you're taking with you in that new relationship, it's going to make it very difficult to be attuned with the dynamic that is played between you two. So lovely. So you mentioned a couple of times that you worked with the dating app for very wealthy people, if I got it right.
Yeah, it wasn't an app, it was a specialist service. So
a specialist service, an agency, a proper agency where people will meet face to face. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. And there was nothing online prior to this. You would actually talk to someone, they will do a screening and would introduce the people one to the other, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The classic way. So is this still happening? Is this still real?
Yeah, I think actually a lot more people are going back to matchmakers and agencies, because I suppose, you know, some of the things you're talking about, in a way, they want people to be vetted, or not that we
Mhm.
can offer 100% assurance, but there's something about the safety element. This
Yes.
person is real, or, I think even if we think about the world, people are looking for more connection. So I think what I'm noticing, I don't work for a dating agency anymore, but what I'm noticing just from my interactions with different organizations is probably more people are doing a bit of the hybrid approach.
Okay.
So obviously, we've got to kind of move with how the world is right now, and apps and technology is amazing, and people will use technology to connect, but they also want a little bit of that personal touch.
Mhm.
And I think also what I'm noticing in terms of trends is less people are less likely to spend a lot of time now speaking to people on the phone or via technology, and they're probably keen to meet up sooner rather than later.
Right.
So I think there is a desire for human interaction, and it might be the pandemic that sort of amplified that for people.
Mm.
But also, it might feel a little bit scary, where you've been sort of probably more isolated or more in your bubble, metaphorically and physically. I think transitioning out and learning how to interact again and learning how to have conversations might also feel a little bit scary.
Mhm. And what's specific to people that are very successful, as you mentioned? Why do they still need an agency or a dating app to meet someone? Because they live quite vibrant lives. They are engaged a lot um, in their work. Probably they stay very very attuned to all of the others. Why do they still need that?
Well, you say that, but I wonder, I really sometimes wonder about the quality of life. And I think if you think about very successful people, sometimes there's a questioning around people's intentions. So, I think, sometimes there can be that element, why would someone want to be with me? So if
Right.
you think about the criteria, are they with me because I have millions or billions in the bank, or are they with me because they connect with me on a personal and emotional level? So I think
Mm.
there can be lots of concerns around trust, around genuineness, and also sometimes I think with dating agencies, I mean, I can only talk from my experience. Um, Sometimes it can also be a way to put in more barriers, because love is a vulnerable thing. And if you're used to achieving, if you can give someone a list and say, I want this, this, and this, sometimes a part of my role was to say, is your list really realistic? And where can there be some flexibility? And I suppose where, genuinely successful people hold themselves to account and are sometimes quite meticulous in how they achieve things. When love doesn't quite work the same way, that's when the vulnerability comes out. So I think maybe even a safe place to be vulnerable, someone that you trust in terms of their expertise. So I think trust is a key thing, but trust is the basis of any relationship, I would say, as well.
Yes, it makes sense. Absolutely. Okay. And would you say that in this dating world, you see more females or males or both genders or all genders? Are there any particularities to us women or them men when they are dating? What's been your greatest learning so far?
Hmm. I mean, it's interesting when you think about kind of evolution, and I think sometimes some of the theories you see sort of coming into play. So with men, I think both men and women use apps and approach agencies, but I think a lot of the time with men it might be that physical element first of all in terms of the criteria, and women, from my experience, probably a little bit more values driven or connection
Okay.
driven. But I think it also depends on the age and stage of that individual.
Yes.
Um, so depending upon their experiences, and if they're more mature, not just even in terms of age, but in terms of life experience, then they sort of recognize that it is about the values that will really genuinely connect you. So I think it really varies according to their life experiences, their experiences of relationships, perhaps some of the challenges that they might have experienced as well, um, and the reason why. But one thing that I've noticed, I think women are a lot more empowered in asking for what they want, and perhaps being less flexible with some of their boundaries, which for me as a woman is great to see. Because I think there can be lots of societal narratives around women, particularly women in their 30s and 40s, around, perhaps failing or not having children, or, don't you want to be married? Don't you want to have a relationship? And a lot of that might vary according to various cultures as well.
Yes.
So I think the expectation on women sometimes can play quite heavily, which is why, it might be easier to just choose a partner. But it's, I think women are now a lot more grounded in terms of what they're looking for, because women genuinely are even more successful, they're educated, they are in higher functioning roles. So I think the role of men and women are changing, and perhaps the expectations alongside that. Also the same with men. I think a lot of men are now valuing an equal partner. So, there are definitely changes, but a lot of that will depend on your own narrative. What is your upbringing? What are your early life experiences? What have you witnessed, for example, in your parents' relationships? What have you internalized in terms of what a good relationship is and isn't? So that's where the inner work really comes in, because sometimes what you think will make you happy may not genuinely make you happy. It might just be a set of rules that you've internalized that may not make sense for you.
Yes, yes. I do see that shift on a cultural level, on a global level. And at the same time, I understand that naturally it's about the individual, their subjective world, and knowing themselves is so essential. I think I agree with that. So now, if women and men are initially searching for something different, men looking more for the look and women searching for that connection, is the dating itself a happy experience or not?
Well, that's coming from a very, like, if we were to stereotype, I think that would be what we would see and what we've heard and what the research has shown. However, I think there are differences in that. So I think the dating experience is as happy as you make it. That's probably what I want to say. And why I say that is, people will have bad experiences. People might meet others who could feel rejecting, or, might be critical, or, there's things that you can't avoid. However, I think where we have the power is the meaning that we attach to these relationships or this experience. So, I think we're in control of how we interpret it. We're in control of how we interpret the experiences that we go through. And we are in control of how much we take on other people's stuff. So, just like, other dating experiences, there will be highs and there will be lows. But I think coming back to knowing who you are, coming back to understanding, what you will and won't settle for. Yes, you might experience pain, you might experience some feeling of rejection or some frustration along the way. But I think holding out the hope is really important, because not everyone is going to be a good fit for you. And that's life as well, just like with friendships. Sometimes we have the pain of friendships fizzling out. So I think it's about how much we invest and how much we choose to take on other people's meanings of us. Because if we're always defining ourselves in terms of how we're externally validated, then we're never really going to know who we are.
So great. Yes, I feel the same, and I've learned the same from my clients. It's a sweet and sour experience, like any relationship, really. But it's very important how you want to look at that experience and what you want to make of it. Because we are co-creating these relationships, isn't it? We need to participate, and the way we participate in them makes all the difference. And the way we respond to the other, rather than reacting. So rightly you said earlier on. I think it's been my learning, working with people that are going through the dating, especially those dating online using the apps, has been that there are three major tips that I've taken with me myself. I think the most important one is to get clear on what you're searching for, of who you really are and what you want. So it all starts from yourself. Get clear on who you really are, what you want in life, and what you really need. And make sure that these are your real needs. And the second one, I think it's about creating not necessarily an irresistible profile, but a genuine one, and engaging, in the most authentic way you can, because that would probably, keep away the deceit that naturally we encounter in relationships. And the third one would be, I think you pointed a little bit on that, to decide on 5 non-negotiables and start from there, to shortlist and narrow down a little bit your search, because otherwise it seems to be quite a tiring experience when you keep dating and dating and dating, and it's going nowhere. So having that clarity about yourself, who you desire to have next to you, and being authentic in between, I think it's been in my learning, guiding my clients, the best way of navigating this beautiful journey, this beautiful dance that we have together. So now towards the end, Rina, it sounds so wonderful. You shared a lot and we explored a lot within this half an hour. What are your best tips to have a very positive dating experience, whether online, on, through agencies, face to face? What's your 3 best tips for a positive dating experience?
Yeah, I'd say make it a part of your life, but don't make it your whole life. So, think about the other things that anchor you, the things that make you yourself. Think about your other relationships, the things that nurture you. So have it as part of your overall package. So dating is not everything that you're doing, because I suppose you want to approach it with an air of fun and engagement and curiosity. And I suppose if you're completely immersed in it, it makes it harder to then reflect.
Mhm.
And I think, dating apps, just like any other social media apps, can be very addictive, and they're designed to be that way. So my second tip will be to make sure you sort of take breaks. Perhaps don't have notifications popping up all the time if it feels too overwhelming. Maybe give yourself kind of breaks away from the app, whether it's kind of daily or within the week, not necessarily feeling the urge to respond straight away. So, reflect before you engage is probably the tip number 2. And then check in on how you're feeling. So, is it, you mentioned there your negotiables and your non-negotiables. I would add to that list, how would you be feeling if you were in an emotionally safe relationship? And that's a really good way to sort of check in with yourself. So if you think about how you feel when you feel emotionally safe, and perhaps some of your healthier relationships, and how you feel when you feel emotionally unsafe, what is it that you're looking for? And you can sort of use that as a little bit of a barometer when you're trying to engage in new conversations or relationships, or you go out on a date. Just thinking about, where am I on the spectrum? And, that should subside and sort of take over from the physical attraction as well. So although the physical attraction won't be there, just thinking about emotional safety as well. And not kind of letting go or overcompensating when it comes to sort of red flags, if you like. And then your emotional safety will help you keep a check on that. So, sometimes even with the high of a great date, you just want to take some time to reflect on, okay, is this how I want to be feeling in a relationship? Do I feel safe emotionally? And where do I want to take this? So, just taking time out to reflect is a key thing.
Very powerful. Thank you so much, Rina. It's been such a wonderful conversation, but it is time to stop now. Big thanks to all of you watching and listening, and many, many thanks to you, Rina, for joining me here today.
Thank you very much, Nicoletta.
That's it for now. Until next time, we are wishing you all good health and happiness.